well beyond when I needed the money. I was still going, and I was like, I know why. I've met these families. I know that they need more material and they want to make more kids. And I know there's tons of other families out there that I don't know, and I'm happy to do it. And at that point, it's work with a purpose. Absolutely.
Family building is supposed to be easy, and it can be a shock when it's not. The roller coaster ride of infertility can be a mix of emotions and conflicting advice along the way. As a reproductive endocrinologist and former fertility patient, I not only help patients build families every day, but I remember what the ride was like for me. Hang on tight as we learn together from experts and share stories from infertility warriors with compassion. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust. Sperm donation can be a solution to a problem. Whether it's a single mom, a lesbian couple, or a heterosexual couple with male factor infertility, the sperm donor can be the answer to family building for many. Although sperm donation is more common now than ever before, there still remain many misconceptions and misunderstandings about the process. Today, we'll delve into that process, the motivation and the consequences from the perspective of a sperm donor named Zach. Thank you so much for being here today, Zach. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to share my experience.
How did you first learn about being a sperm donor?
I learned about the sperm bank basically because I was a starving student. I was in college and I was doing a lot in college, like very active, but I didn't have any jobs that paid very much. I was student body president and president of the Honor Society and things. So I was very active, but they paid a stipend, not very much money, and I could hardly pay my rent. So I was thinking about ways in which I could pay my rent and thought about blood, found out that I didn't pay anything. I found out there was a sperm bank, and because that was the other fluid I thought that maybe I could donate, and happened to be one nearby. And I just called them up and scheduled an appointment. Pretty simple, straightforward. I didn't know anyone who had done it beforehand. I saw some funny videos online, like some comedy skits about sperm banks and stuff, but that was my only introduction to it beforehand. I also had a couple friends where I grew up. Two of the people I hold in highest regard in my formative years there were both full-blood brothers. Actually, they have two moms and both product of one sperm donor. So I already believed in the program and that I thought that it was already amazing from a young age. When I found that out, it blew my mind. I always thought that was just an amazing gift. I never thought about myself being one until I, needed some money as well. But it was a major motivation for me too, to feel like my values were in line with the donation process. I didn't know if I would be selected, and I figured if I was, then I would just be one more person in people's Rolodex that they could look through and see, okay, well, this donor is also an option, and actually prefer them for my personal family, and I'd love to be able to provide that if people needed it.
There's so many misconceptions in this process. I think that there will be a lot of people out there that assume that if somebody wants to be a sperm donor, they just walk into a sperm bank and give a specimen and just walk right out. But it's quite a process to actually go through the testing and questionnaires. And can you tell me a little bit about that selection process?
Yeah, it really is. And I would say most of the donors I've talked to, I've referred people. No one I've referred actually has made it through the process. So that tells you something. And most of the people I do refer are very active, tend to be pretty healthy, and even they don't make it through the process. So they tend to think, oh yeah, I've got this stuff. I'm getting rid of it all the time anyways. Might as well go and sure, I'll make some money. And then they find out that like their motility, the mobility, and like not good numbers. And so in addition to that, just like having the bank check your actual sperm count and everything, there's a lot more behind it too. So if you make it through the first barrier, which is your count and the strength of your sperm, that kind of thing, you have to also do a genetic background check to make sure there's no congenital traits that you might pass on that might interfere with the growth of a healthy child. But yeah, a lot of donors will think, yeah, you just come in and become a donor and then you keep donating. But most of them tend to find out that their fertility is not what they assumed it to be.
The sperm bank, wants to make sure that they can provide their clients or the people that are buying the sperm a good sample so they have a good chance of getting pregnant. And then they're giving information like genetic testing. But there's also STD or STI, sexually transmitted infection testing, right? And then what about learning about your own health history or your family's health history?
Yeah, so they do screen you for STIs on a regular basis when you are donating. So everything that you do donate is going to be quarantined for about 6 months. And so they'll test you, and then everything until your next STI test is going to be quarantined. And then if everything's clear, then they release those vials for families to purchase. So I had to talk to my mom and my dad about their parents and their grandparents and what they died of, what kind of morbidity has been happening in my family that people should be aware of so they can make informed decisions about who they choose as a donor. So I got to learn a lot about my history and my family in that way, which was an interesting experience, but it's also, it's a lot. It was like a 30-page document or something like that, in addition to questions like how I feel about life and my aspirations and different things where families can get a greater sense of the donor that they're interacting with.
Sounds like a college application, like college essays.
What I've been told is that I filled it out in a fairly atypical fashion. A lot of people just give a couple word answers, and I had like multiple paragraphs for many things. And what I've been told by both the sperm bank and other mothers is that they were looking specifically for more information about a donor so they could get more of a sense of who the donor was, so they could understand that maybe, these kinds of thought patterns and things might translate to their child. And if you're looking at 6 or 8 different tall white men, 6'1", whatever, blonde as a baby, brown hair, later on blue eyes, then something's going to tip the scales, and it's probably going to be learning a little bit more about the donor via those written responses and audio interviews and things, because this bank does also have audio interviews you can listen to.
I know. I love that you can record your voice and answering to questions, and people can listen to that and get a feel a little bit more about who you are. What about pictures?
Yeah, they also have you submit pictures from childhood. I think they try to get around 10 photos or so before the age of 13. I've had friends potentially want me to be a donor for them, knowing that I was, and liking other attributes about me. And also I've talked to people via dating apps who are actually on there looking for donors, which is an interesting way to go. I guess it's a good way to go. You think the person's attractive, you want to make a baby that's also attractive, maybe combine well.
Wow.
So I've actually talked to them about using a sperm bank instead of a donor they find here and the reasons why they might want to do that. Hopefully, institutionally, the motivation is to have more safety and more details available, and not to make it less stringent on the donor side, because I think it's a good thing that there's more ways in which you can make sure that you're making a healthy baby.
In this initial process and kind of screening phase and going to the sperm bank, was any part of it just kind of awkward, or like they talk about in the movies where, all the stand-up comedians have loved to have jokes about this process? I did some serious research for this interview, and one of my research projects was watching Delivery Man with Vince Vaughn. So for anyone that hasn't watched it, I don't know when it came out, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Something like that, maybe a little longer even.
Yeah. And so he is, I guess he's probably in his mid-30s, and he's just living his life. And you find out a little bit into the movie that about 10 years ago, he was a sperm donor, and he's contacted by a lawyer representing 140 of the 533 children that resulted from his donations, and just a lot of the misconceptions in a funny but poignant way. Like, it's actually, I enjoyed the movie, but I also, laughed a little bit, and it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly gloss over a lot of the aspects of the beauty and empathy of the donation itself, and people create families who couldn't otherwise, and to create families that are really exactly what they want too, which is not something that most people get. You meet someone, you fall in love with them potentially, and it doesn't really, well, you get what you get at that point. You like this person and you want to make a baby with them. It doesn't mean that you're selecting for the traits that you want or, mutations that wouldn't interact well.
You've been doing this for a while. I assume your family knows that you're a sperm donor now. So when they found out, how did that go?
It definitely caused a number of different kinds of reactions. Some people in my family thought it was hilarious. Some people thought it was amazing. Other people, like my mother, for instance, was horrified because for her, she figured that all of these children technically are her grandchildren, and she would never have access to them to be able to, give them an extra loving grandparent in their life. So that was very frustrating to her for a number of years, till she met a friend of hers whose child also came from a sperm donation program. This woman let my mom know that there's a third-party donor registry site where if you have their donor number, you can find all the parents who are on that donor registry to find their donor siblings or dibblings. After a long conversation with her to make sure that she would respect these people's autonomy to, have their own families, once she was clearly on board with that and was the whole time, I was like, okay, here's my donor number. And then the floodgates opened. And she found dozens of mothers who'd already contacted one another. And at this time, the youngest kids were probably 3 or 4. And I started talking with some of them because some of them wanted to see if I'd be open to talking with them, even though their kids were really young. And I was open to that. So through that, I've talked to easily a dozen different parents.
Zach, okay, how many kids?
I can only guess, but I know of probably 30 plus through a couple little networks that some of the mothers have told me about. They're all in total, it's probably over 50, I would guess, because the U.S. alone has a cap on 25 families. And a lot of these families I know of in the U.S. actually have at least 2 kids already. And then each other country has their own cap.
What do you think about that? How does that make you feel?
I'm really happy to have been able to help create these families. I don't feel like I have any father role or anything like that, but when I do meet the children or the families, it's a really nice feeling that I was able to help, and it feels more like I'm a distant uncle or cousin or something like that. And it's a little surreal. It's more than a little surreal. It's quite a trip to see all the kids, and they look very much like I did when I was a child.
And so it's a really positive experience. Like, you really feel like, without you, these families wouldn't exist.
It's an incredibly positive experience. Yeah. And not only in that, these lives were created that wouldn't otherwise if I hadn't chosen to become a donor, but I'm getting to meet all these really interesting people that I wouldn't otherwise. These people have their own contained lives. They have really interesting careers and ideas and are doing interesting things. I really enjoy my conversations with them, and that would never have happened otherwise. It has opened doors in ways not only just to connections with people, but to understanding myself on a deeper level that I never could have imagined. These kids will, of their own accord, probably some of them at least, want to look into greater detail where they come from on my side of things. And that's a good positive motivation for me to keep doing the things that I am interested in, both from just curiosity, but also from my value system. And it's just a little extra motivation.
That is really cool. I had not thought about that. Eventually, these kids might want to reach out to you, get to know you a little bit better. And so knowing that you're going to meet them kind of keeps you on your goals and keeps you growing and learning and wanting to be someone that they might want to reach out to.
Something parents definitely should be feeling, for themselves, for their children. But for me, it's obviously a little bit more removed. But it's a nice little added bonus for myself, a little push. I think personally that it's incredibly unfair of someone to be a donor and not be open about it. Just from a pure, basic, empathetical standpoint, if I were the product of a donation program, I would like to be able to figure out who that donor was so I could understand more about myself. Not only just from a developmental perspective, but also from a health perspective. What what else has come up for this person? Like, I don't know if the sperm bank has actually kept up with them, and it's probably, they're not mandated to report anything to the sperm bank. So what else has come up in their life that maybe I should know of?
When sperm donors donate, they're usually young and healthy, but maybe over 10, 15 years, 20 years, they develop type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or something like that. And by keeping in touch with the sperm bank or the family staying in touch, they could learn, hey, I might have a tendency towards this. And maybe if I live a healthier lifestyle, I'm not going to develop diabetes too or something. I've been in fertility for over 15 years, and it was definitely more common and just assumed that sperm donors, egg donors wanted to stay anonymous. And we in the field wanted to honor that in order to have people donate. Like there was a real assumption that if it was open, that people wouldn't want to be donors and we wouldn't be able to help our families build their families. Now, with 23andMe and Ancestry.com and these ways that you can learn about connections and genetics, it's really opening the door to how important it is to be open. And, you actually cannot be anonymous anymore. Has being a sperm donor impacted any of your personal relationships?
When I did start, my partner was not happy about it for a number of reasons. One was that she thought that it was something that she should be included on since, she was my partner and it could potentially affect her. Like say we stay together and get married and if we went down that relationship escalator, and it could ultimately be something that she would have in her life because it's a lot of potential kids and it would take up time and energy. And that's something that she does have some kind of say in. And to that degree, I think she was probably right. I probably should have had that conversation with her, even though I don't think it would have changed my mind. I still needed money and I still believed in the program. And especially since I got called back multiple times to keep donating for siblings, it wouldn't have changed my mind at all, but it was an issue. And that was more on the emotional side of things. And then there was also a more practical issue of her perception that it would decrease our ability to have a spontaneous sex life. One aspect of sperm donation is that they mandate 48 to 72 hours, at least at this bank, of abstinence between donations. So that gives you, say you're on the 48-hour side, maximum of 3 times a week. And then if you were to, say, go in there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have from Friday to Saturday to do as much as you like there, and then you're back on your schedule for 48 hours, right? A bit of a turnoff for a partner. Maybe you donate less to make sure that you're having more of that spontaneity.
Mm-hmm. And did you stay together?
We did break up partially because of that, because it was not something I was willing to budge on. And it was, from her, perceived as something that was in the way in the relationship. Since
then, when you're meeting new people, is it something that you bring up pretty quickly, or?
Yeah, I tend to tell people pretty early on, at least more so in the context of like if I'm going to be dating them. So if I'm on a dating app and I actually meet someone in person, I don't like message them in the first like couple messages and tell them, hey, I was friend, just like the whole stream there. But when I'm in person, it's something that tends to come up fairly naturally, and I kind of I don't mind talking about it at all. It's an interesting subject, and I kind of find it as a litmus test for people too, because if people aren't okay with it, it's a pretty significant thing to know right off the bat that like, okay, this guy is weird. I'm not into it. Like this could be, too much work down the line if he's got a bunch of kids, blah, blah. And I wouldn't be interested in that person. So it's a good way in that way to know that this is not going to be a good romantic fit. My current partner finds it really fascinating and beautiful. Quite the opposite in that way. Thinks it's just an amazing gift.
I was wondering what it was like to actually stay in touch with these families and the kind of questions that they ask you.
Sometimes they ask me some things or they send me some photos or some stories and like, oh, the kid did this. She's like so rambunctious. And I was like, I heard you were, I was like, yeah, sorry, can't do much about it. But yeah, it'll pay off, I think.
That's really fun. Well, yeah, if the kid's doing anything amazing, they'll be like, oh, this is definitely, on the egg side. And anything rambunctious, oh, it's definitely got to be Zach. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Right.
it seems to be that way. Like, I was nothing like this child.
But I'm just wondering what it was like hearing that first child was born. Did it make it more real?
For me, since I had kind of a relationship with these people, they were like kind of excited. So they would tell me things like, oh, we just found out you've got 2 kids and blah, blah. And that was my first time knowing. Like they hadn't told me anything before that. So there was like a few. And I actually like teared up in the office. And I was like, oh, it was just like really sweet to know that like it's not a minor thing to help someone create a life. And while I didn't have too much to do with it, I was very like touched by it. And that continued to happen every time. My mom just sent me a photo today of a child who was born yesterday, probably about 30 miles south.
When I first asked you, what is your motivation or how did you learn about it? How'd you get started? You're very honest. You're like, I needed to make my rent. It was definitely a means to an end, but you kept going back and it's not an easy process. There's a lot of hoops to jump through and it's just not like walking up to a window and giving your sample. So there must be something more that kind of kept you going back. It's not just the monies.
No, actually, to be honest, the more graphic side of things, like the actual donation process itself, gets really old really quick. You're not in the mood. You have to do it after you've been there hundreds of times. Like no charm that was there in the beginning had worn off very quickly. It's not the most pleasant experience, but you keep in mind like A, that you're helping people make families, and B, you're here because you do actually make some money as well. And as a means, it really is like a means to an end. Not just the ends being monetary, but it's like, this is work and it feels like work.
And there's true purpose.
And there's true purpose. Yeah. And that is definitely like well beyond when I needed the money. I was still going and I was like, I know why I've met these families. I know that they need more material and they want to make more kids. And I know there's tons of other families out there that I don't know. And I'm happy to do it. And at that point, it's work with a purpose. Absolutely.
So for anybody that's out there thinking about being a sperm donor, like listening to this and saying, wow, that sounds like an amazing process, any advice to them?
Yeah. Realize that the choices that you make in your life have a direct impact on your ability to pass on your genetic material in a positive way or a degraded way. And your choices in your food and your exercise and getting sunlight and things like that all do matter. And anything that you do, good or bad, generally takes about 3 months to translate into your sperm. And if you want to be a donor, I would take it as a serious responsibility because it is. While it's also a nice source of income, it's not insignificant by any means. It also is really important. These families take a great deal of time to look through many different donors and choose you very specifically. And the least you can do is make sure that you're in the best health you can. Even before you go in to actually give a sample, you could contact them and be like, hey, what can I do to make sure that if I were to come in a few months, I'm in the best fertility health I can be? And they can help you with that. Anything you can do to help people make a healthier baby is worthwhile. A lot of it is actually within people's control. A lot of fertility, from my understanding, has to do with what you do in your own environment, not purely your genetics. Sometimes it's that too.
Is there anything else, any other advice you would give somebody that's interested in being a donor?
Yeah, I know in some areas people have different options of banks they could go to. And in my case, I didn't have the option. There's just one sperm bank, the Seattle Sperm Bank. And if I had options, I would look for many of the things that I actually have found in this bank, like some fairly rigorous testing and screening, because if you make it through the process, you get to be one of those chosen few. Like this particular bank, I think it's like 93 to 99% somewhere in there get rejected. And that's a pretty high bar to pass. So you can know from the family side that they're really going for equality, which isn't necessarily in their best interest in some ways, right? Like they have fewer donors that they can then pool from. But as from the donor side, they're also, at least this bank is really making sure that they take care of you. Like they have the same doctor sees you. They even do things like give you fruit like at the front desk. So they're invested in like your health. So they're not giving you like Snickers bars and other kinds of things. And they actually, they do care, and they're very sociable and friendly, and do want the best for you. One other thing that I would look for in a sperm bank if I had options is I would like to know what the mission is of the sperm bank. What is the ethos of the owner? What is their real motivation? Because if it is really purely just profit, that's not really enough for me, especially in a profit-driven endeavor that is creating life. I'd like it to be something more about really helping families do something that they couldn't do without a sperm donation clinic.
Well, thanks again for being here, Zach. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed that conversation with Zach. Listening to Zach tell us his story helped clarify so many of the misconceptions surrounding sperm donation. It is a more complicated process than most people probably understand. There are benefits as well as consequences. Benefits like helping people and having a huge impact on family building. But consequences like time and impact on your personal relationships. I just learned so much today. I hope you did too. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust. If you like this episode, let us know. Give us a 5-star review and follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Baby or Bust is produced by Mark Ramsey, Jamie Solis, and Greg Moga. Executive produced by Paul Anderson, Nick Pinella, and Andrew Greenwood for Workhouse Media. Baby or Bust is a Mark Ramsey media production.